Ladies, have you been wanting to make a change, but you don't feel ready? Here's the truth. Readiness is a lie. The model of confidence for women is backward, and we need to flip it. I'm Cara Poppet, author of a new book, Big Freaking Change. After coaching thousands of women, I discovered action gives us confidence, not the other way around. If we wait to feel ready, we'll wait forever. So if you're ready to get unstuck and step into the life you've always dreamed about, visit bigfreakingchange.com right now and order your copy. Welcome to the Big Freaking Change podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of those who took bold action, embraced uncertainty, and transformed their lives without ever feeling ready. I'm your host, Cara Poppet, author of The Big Freaking Change and the creator of the Get Unstuck Cycle of Change model. Each week, we'll sit down with remarkable individuals who have taken bold steps in their lives, personally and professionally, to make meaningful change. Whether you're seeking a career shift, personal growth, or a boost in confidence, our goal is to inspire you to stop waiting and start taking action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Big Freaking Change. I'm your host, Cara Poppet, and I'm so delighted to be here with a great friend, a great amigo, a great hombre, Eduardo Villavicencio, and with the Spanish, Villavicencio. Did I say it okay?
Muy bien, sí.
Okay.
Sí, très bien, très bien.
Gracias, muchacho. So today, Eduardo is here, and I would love to just read your bio so everyone knows the brilliance you're going to share with us today. So Eduardo Villavicencio is a bilingual keynote speaker, author, and corporate trainer with more than 20 years experience designing and delivering educational programs. He is the first generation US-born child of Ecuadorian immigrant parents and the first generation to attend college. And he didn't just go to any college, let me tell you. After studying economics at Harvard University, his first job was as a high school math teacher. This led to a career as a director of technology and eventually started a small technology consulting business. Eventually, Eduardo served various government agencies as a human-centered change manager through companies such as KPMG, Grant Thornton, and Salesforce. He is now an accredited Gallup Clifton strengths coach and travels the globe facilitating strengths-based team workshops for sales and management leaders. Eduardo's true passion is helping individuals see and be the highest and best version of themselves. When he's not teaching or traveling, you can find Eduardo dancing salsa, bachata, or any music with rhythm anywhere there is space. That's why I like you extra, because you can dance.
Because I love to dance. That's right.
Yeah. So thank you, Eduardo, for being here. I really appreciate it. Mucho gusto. No, that's not correct. Sí, mucho gusto. Okay.
Mucho gusto. Muy bien.
Okay. So Eduardo, let's kick off the call with you telling our audience the biggest change you made in your life, something you would like to share, a big freaking change, a significant moment, and if you felt ready to make that change.
Yeah, actually, thanks so much, Cara. Thanks for inviting me to be here and to talk to your audience. Yeah, I would say one of the biggest changes is actually the use of my name, Eduardo. And even just, I really appreciate the honor that you provide in trying to say my name in the way that I grew up hearing my parents say it. And I think that would be probably one of the biggest changes that when you talk about not being ready for, I think that would be it. So my full name is Eduardo Arturo Villavicencio Vizcaíno. And like any good Latino name, I could probably keep going and we could dance a little salsa to the rhythm. But I grew up mostly, I didn't really start using Eduardo in a professional setting or at all until really late in my, maybe I would say late 30s, early 40s. And I can give a little bit more background about that. But I grew up, at first being Eddie and then eventually Ed. And I actually have quite a bit of resumes that I can see that I sent out with the name Edward at the top of it. And Edward is definitely not even close to what I would say it's part of my identity.
It's so interesting how a name gives us a label, right? Eduardo, Eddie, Edward.
Yeah.
And I think this resonates with so many people, as sometimes we don't fully embrace our identity for different reasons, right? There's societal norms, there's insecurities with how people are pronouncing it. There's a lot of different change there. But when you decided to own your name and your full name, talk to me about the internal changes that you experience within yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So part of that was realizing that there was actually something I was hiding and masking. And so I think when you and I met, I was working on one of the keynotes I call Transforming Inherited Conversations. And what I didn't realize was I had some type of belief in my head that had been built over years, right? Years, decades of my childhood, of my teen life, of my early professional and in college experience that said, hey, if I have a Latino or ethnic or different sounding name, it might limit my success in life, whatever I deem success is. And so I think that that was really the first, just becoming aware that in saying Edward or sending an email or a resume that had Edward at the top of, I was trying to mask that my parents were immigrants, that I was first generation, that I spoke a different language. And so that I think was one of the challenges, even to the fact that in high school, I didn't study Spanish. I actually took French class. And then I learned some Korean. And then when I went to college, I took Japanese, I took Italian, everything except Spanish, even though people think, oh, aren't you fluent in Spanish? And I was like, well, not exactly. I didn't study Spanish. So I think that was probably the inner experience was I didn't even know in college that I could say Eduardo or that it even would make a difference. What I do know is that when people would say, can I just call you Ed? I'm like, oh yeah, I grew up in high school thinking Ed is fine because Edward was definitely not something that I think I would respond to. But it also was a different persona. And so I think inside I didn't realize I was living a sort of imposter life when I was introducing myself as Edward.
It's so interesting. Like, I look at my name, Cara. If someone said, hey, can I call you Carrie? I'd be like, no, my name's Cara. But it's so funny when you have a longer name that people shorten it and you just are supposed to go with it. Eduardo, talk to me a little bit about the work you do. You do so much great coaching. And what are the key findings you notice when you're trying to inspire change in others?
Yeah. So one of the things, so you mentioned earlier at the introduction that I'm certified in something called Gallup's Clifton Strengths. So that's something, an assessment, like many other assessments out there. And like all models, they can be useful. They're not necessarily all the truth. But a lot of the science and validity behind taking this assessment is pretty neat because for me, as someone who leans a little bit analytical, one of the things that I realize the best thing to give someone courage in terms of changing is to know what is it that they're bringing to the table. What is something that's so unique to them that maybe they don't even know and know how to get language to it. And so the Clifton Strengths assessment that I became certified in coaching is something that I encourage people to take to find out, almost reinforce for some people when they're self-aware, yeah, this is what I'm good at. But additionally, to give them language, right? To be able to give and provide words that say to someone, whether it's a manager, a teammate, or in your personal life, a partner, right? This is what I bring to the table. Additionally, this is what I need to succeed. And I think that's another piece of when you're thinking about change, because change is just inevitable. And so at any point, you really need to understand what is it that someone needs in order to successfully go through change. And I think this, what they call their top 5 or top 10 talents out of the 34 areas that people have, helps people kind of say, oh, this is the information I need. I need to ask more questions, or I need to connect with more people, or I need to feel like I have flexibility in my choices. I need to know how we got here. I need to know where we're going. Whatever it is, helps people maybe determine, like, this is what I need to succeed, and gives them language for this is what I bring to the table, to the team, to the call, whatever it is. And so that's kind of back to that identity, like being aware of who you are and also your patterns of thinking, feeling, acting, and what you bring.
I have to say, when you sent me the survey and I did it, the information was so profound because it was like, oh, this is a natural strength that I don't even think about, but it really stands out. And heads up, you got to pay attention. This is something that's not really developed, that is a shortcoming of yourself, right? And to focus on your strengths, but to be really aware of where you fall short. And so for me, it really gave me that clarity of my natural tendencies and, oh, okay, I'm falling into this because I'm not doing, X, Y, or Z. So highly recommend that. Talk to me about your keynote, which I absolutely love. Inherit
Inherited.
inherited
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
It's a very, very fascinating concept, and it's our identity, right? We all have parts of our identity we're subconsciously just carrying, and it really kind of brought to light, what other labels do we just take on that maybe are not for our highest good. So talk to me about your keynote and, the key findings that most people take away from it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's connected back to that self-awareness piece, right? I'll just give an example. When I first got to Harvard, freshman year, I moved all the way from Los Angeles to Boston. I was leaving home, and I was really looking forward to this is where I'm supposed to be because I was valedictorian, got good grades, I learned, like did all of the things to get there. But once I got there, that what people call the imposter syndrome, which I don't really believe in anymore, but it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. But basically, I got there and I thought I was supposed to be somewhere else or I didn't deserve to
Mm.
be. And part of where that came from was people asking me my name and saying, wait, what? And so I was like, no, no, don't call me Eddie. That's too childish. But then just having this, some name that didn't sound different. And so inherited conversations is a concept that, I've put together based on a lot of different books out there. So for example, there's a book called Chatter. It talks about the inner voice. Everyone has Ethan Kross, who talks about how everyone has an inner critic, inner voice. And depending on how aware you are, that voice can really influence some of the decisions you make on a day to day basis. Some people would call it maybe self talk. Some people have gotten really good at hearing their self talk, but unfortunately, we have a kind of a negativity bias. So we will mostly look for the things we do. So someone will go and do a presentation, for example, at work, right? You walk out of that presentation and everyone might think you did a great job. So the first thing though you're thinking about is, I wish I had said this, or I forgot to say this. How could I not do that? And that negativity bias is what people live with. Well, where do they get their impressions as to how good they should be? It's growing up. And so some simple conversation like what sports team you root for? That might be from where you grew up. What color can you wear to work? That might be culturally like, oh, so there's every culture, every group has, I believe, inherited phrases, and you hear it in the jokes and the beliefs and the stories in the takes one to know one, or birds of a feather flock together, or give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Any of those phrases by themselves are open to any kind of interpretation. But if you always hear that from your father, then your mother, then your third grade teacher, then your fifth grade teacher, I think the brain subconsciously starts to develop a belief. And that is kind of, there's a book out there called Don't Believe Everything You Think. Well, that exactly is right because we don't often question or examine what operating system one might say, what beliefs, rules, traditions, rituals. And we can easily see that from, kids in their teens and, middle school teens when they say, no, this is what we always used to do. Well, always might be 3 months for them, but all of a sudden it's always, and so traditions, sometimes we just need to, again, not throw them away, just question, where do they come from? And why do I believe this? Why do I never wear red? Or why do I always say, bless you? Those are simple little things that are harmless sort of individually, but as an aggregate, they could really determine what kind of job do you feel good at doing. So for example, I was a teacher, and for many years, as good as a teacher as I was, I think I had grown up thinking, no, why would I go to an Ivy League school to be an educator? Because I think I had heard a lot of the phrases that people hear in the States, United States of America, which is those who can do, those who can't teach. And what a
Wow.
horrible thing to grow up with, right? But I'm also pretty
Yeah.
sure my immigrant parents thought I would go to college to become a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. So in my head, I would find less satisfaction doing something I am really, really good at. And you can
Yeah.
see that now based on just I can teach adults, I can teach kids, I can, create learning environments. And that's actually what I do better. I facilitate. And part of why I've been able to do that is because I've gotten really clear what are my talents that I can create to focus to create a room where someone feels safe to learn. And that's kind of a little bit of my philosophy of how do any of us learn. We have to be open to change, and changing the way we see ourselves is one of the biggest changes I think that people can sometimes be really confronted with.
Yeah, and it's something you have to actually be intentional with. It's not going to be obvious, even the shortfalls. We think, oh, this is what everyone is like, or even our strengths. Well, why can't everyone figure it out? And I think sometimes about silencing that inner voice, silencing that critic. In my book, I talk about, where did that voice come from and whose voice is it that's
Whose
in your
voice is
head?
it? Yeah.
Because often it's not ours. It's a role model, it's a parent, it's a boss, it's a partner. Someone has said something and that now turns into your inner voice. And that's why I think as parents, for those of us that are parents, it's so important that we facilitate really healthy conversations. We praise our children for their strengths so that they have a really healthy inner voice. And I love the work you do. And I love the facilitation that you do because you bring people to the awareness that change is possible for all of us. You just need some necessary ingredients. You need some self-reflection, you need some tools, and then boom, you got the formula and you can take action. So I know you wrote a book and I'd love for you to speak on that and talk to us about the key findings in your book.
Yeah, well, actually, the best part, so I have a copy right here. It's called
Awesome.
Fortaleza. You can see that. It's actually
Fortaleza.
co-authored,
Okay.
co-authored with 19 other Latino just superstars. Folks, it's basically draws on stories of resilience, stories of just so many like of traveling, of immigrants, of different of strength, really. Fortaleza means strength. So it's ironic that I got connected with a group of authors who wanted to share from their strengths. And so in the book, my chapter is particularly talking about our legacy and what we believe our legacy should be. And some of that legacy is usually coming from, especially for those who are either descendant of immigrants or somewhere in your culture, in your because we're all in some ways immigrants, right? So somewhere in your heritage is a message that has come about either the current place you're at or the place you could or should be at. So in here, I talk about liberating your legacy. And how do we do that? Well, first, you want to understand what is it that you inherited, right? That potentially has kept you from trying out something new. And I like that even, one of the phrases in your book, like Big Freaking Change, I remember that most people hear the phrase ready, set, go, right? And so that's, or even ready, set, aim, right? And that in and of itself, it almost gives a rule, right, to the brain that says you have to be ready before you take an action. And I love what you're doing with your work because you're actually trying to teach the brain, no, maybe you can take an action, right? And that will actually get you ready. So that you are right there transforming a conversation that a lot of people inherit, right? And it's just a little phrase, but they don't know that that phrase has been in there gathering evidence for a lot of their life. Well, that's the way it goes. That's the way I heard it in the movie. That's the way my coach said it on the soccer field. That's the way, like, so it's really neat to be able to do that. Yeah, but in this book, a lot of what I'm sharing about is a personal story of how I can go back and from when I was a kid to when I got to college. And actually, I even had to take a year off. And I did not used to tell people about that year off. And so in my chapter, I share a little bit about what would have been something that my mom or dad would say, wait, don't tell people that. How could you tell them that? That's not something you share. And yet part of what a big change for me is realizing vulnerability is actually a sign of leadership. Authenticity is actually a sign that people can trust you because you have to kind of give trust that they'll give you grace and the benefit of the doubt in order to get trust. And that's actually one of the things I love teaching nowadays is talk about relationships and the relationship ladder that companies can build with their customers, with their stakeholders, internal and or external.
You know what I love? Even the concept ready, set, go that you brought up. Think of how many times in our entire life we've been asked the question, are you ready?
Are
Are you
you
ready to
ready?
go to Harvard? Are you ready to
Exactly.
graduate? Are you ready to start this new job? And so we are conditioned that way, and we have to give ourselves permission to be unready and imperfect and go anyway. And I think that's how we, embrace ourselves a bit more. We calm down the inner chatter. We decide that we can change the outcome of our life if we are embracing change. And there's so much resistance to change itself. So your book talks about you're opening up vulnerability and authenticity. And how does that benefit everybody when you're authentic, whether you're in leadership or not, or you have your own company or not? But talk to me a little bit more about vulnerability and authenticity.
Yeah, I think so. Coming from a male perspective, that who traditionally in the Latino, culture and many other, minority cultures in this country, in the United States of America, one of the things that I think males come with a patriarchy of sorts. I'm the protector, or I'm the provider, and that is true. And what's interesting is what I like to say is it an either or? In other words, can you not be authentic or can you not be vulnerable and emotional and still be a protector, right? Can you provide and also show a bit of humility, right? Or a bit of I don't know, kind of like, the curiosity that comes with admitting I don't know the solution. I think a couple of months ago I had my first ever fracture. I broke my arm,
Yeah.
right? I had to have surgery and, went through a whole bunch of things. Now, I was literally trying to just like strong.
Keep
I had a
going.
couple. Keep going. I had my surgery. I said to the surgeon, "Hey, I have a training the next day. Can I get on a plane the next week?" And he was like, "Yeah, I guess you could." And I was just trying to power through it.
Yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes.
And what was ironic is a week after that surgery, I was flying to do a keynote and moderate a panel on well-being, in particular for a set of Latino men. And so, what was interesting is I took the my inherited conversations concept, and I thought, you know what? What are some of the phrases that I've inherited around my health, around being a man and being sick or recovering from surgery? And so I found three easy ones. They're super easy. Once you look, it's easy to
it's
find.
it's
But
there.
one simple one was something that when I went there, I asked the men in the room. I said, "What do you think some of the phrases would occur if you broke your arm and you had to say, you know what, I can't make it to work today. I can't get on that plane. You need to find a substitute." And right away, the first one that came up is like, "Well, men don't cry." That's right. Or another one was "be strong." And these are so in Espanol, hombres no lloran, sé fuerte, which is like be strong, right? And a couple other phrases that came up, and it was great. None of us in the room may have known each other, but we could all agree that we have heard a version of this. And so I shared in front of everyone that I was scared that I wasn't going to make it on the plane, that I was scared I wouldn't, all of these things. And by saying that, I was able to bring up an environment where other men felt like they could share, you know what, I remember this time, or I'm scared of this. And I think that's that piece of vulnerability. I think one of the things that we're learning about leaders is that we will trust someone that is human, right?
Right. Right.
More than someone who
Perfect.
looks perfect. And I think that's
Absolutely.
part of, like, I love what you're saying about ready. Say, yeah, I mean, are you ready? What a showstopper kind of question, right? I love the not yes no questions. I love the what are you excited about? Or something. I mean, and you have them. I know in your book about like how do we get to that experience? And part of it is being on the other side, realizing, wait, this is just my first attempt. This is just a trial run, a dry run. And I think all of life is in some ways a performance art.
What's interesting is the concept of being unready and imperfect gives us permission to just go. And instead of, asking my dancers or other entrepreneurs that I coach, are you ready? I say, are you prepared? And usually the answer is yes, yeah, fully. I'm prepared. I've done my work. And then that gives our permission and our brain signal that like it's safe to go because I've been prepared. But readiness itself is not a state of being, it's a feeling that comes after, and we have it in reverse order. So that's really profound.
It is
It
totally right.
is, right?
Yeah.
It's like a simple statement that can just open up your mindset to take action and go before you feel ready, because that's where life happens. That's like the intersection to greatness, right? You have
Yes.
opportunity, you can hold yourself back waiting to feel ready, and you're going to wait forever. And that feeling never comes. And so that's really why I'm so passionate about it.
And if I could say so, I think part of where I originally got this, which is ironic, the environment of K-12, where I first, I think, started exploring my own self-awareness, right? I worked at a boarding school my first year out of college, and all of a sudden I saw young men and women who were being allowed by their parents to come to a school in New England, right? Different far off place perhaps, right, to get the best experience. And they were going through being freshmen in high school at 13, 14, what I was experiencing, or I had experienced in my freshman year, 17, 18 years old at college. And I realized, oh, I could create an environment for them where they don't feel like they don't belong, where they don't feel like they're out of place. And I think what I was going to say about the K-12 environment is I learned about Carol Dweck, which she did the work on, mindset. And part of that, you're talking to the parents who are listening in. I think the most important thing parents can do is be conscious of their language, because in Carol Dweck's mindset book, what you realize is if you praise performance or results, right, then you will have your son or daughter, the human being that we're raising, always be looking for extrinsic um,
Validation.
validation, right? And that then develops extrinsic motivation. And so there's never the action. If the language, though, instead of praising the results, praises the behavior that you want to see repeated, that's when you can get to that place of, are you prepared? Well, that's a great growth mindset question, because if someone can say, I'm not as prepared, right, as I would like to be, but I'm still going to go, then the next time when you ask them, well, what would you do differently? I guess I would prepare more. It's something that's within their control. It's something that goes back to like ownership. they have something that they can do. And when I got to college, I can tell you, I had a fixed mindset because I got there and all of a sudden multivariable calculus didn't seem as easy as it did in high school. And I was like, oh, that's because these kids must be smarter than me. I'm not
Mm,
that smart. And I know somewhere in doing after school programs and teaching kids my first business was ninth grade. I had a tutoring business. And I basically tutored kids in math. And if it was English or history, I would have my friend and they would tutor and I'd take $2 off an hour off of that. So in my head, I'd always been in education, always loved it. But again, didn't really, because of my inherited conversation, I hadn't really respected it. But it's the Carol Dweck, it's that type of work around mindsets that has people focus on behavior
yeah, and
versus
effort.
results. Yeah, and
Yeah, and
effort. Thank you.
effort, right?
Yeah.
Like when my kids, it's very self-aware of this is when they come in and show me like a picture that they made and I say, "Oh, I just love it. I'm so proud of you." Instead of saying that first, I say, "Oh, it's beautiful. Do you love it?" I give it to them right away and they go, "Yeah, I love it." I go, "Oh, I love it so much. Let's put it, do you want to put it on the fridge? Do you want to put it on the board? You want to
Yeah.
put it in your room? Like let's celebrate it." And I take that moment because I want my children to be intrinsically motivated and
Yeah.
intrinsically validated for
Yes.
themselves so they don't need to go external for validation. And it's so important when my kids say, I can't do this. I say, well, we just have to like shift, or you just don't have enough practice. Like of course you can do it. We just need to like work harder or try something different or, do the reps. And I want them to grow up feeling that they can do anything, right? With effort. Nothing's going to come easy, but it's like with effort. And as a child, I had to work super hard to achieve good grades. And I had this limiting voice of like, you're not that smart, right? You're not that smart. And so I had to work my tail off. And my sister and brother are very smart naturally. My entire family's very smart. And I always felt like, oh, like they don't even have to study and they get 90s. And I have
Right.
to like study my tail off and get a 75.
Yes.
But later on in life, I appreciate it because I have work ethic and drive.
Yes.
If I'm not
That's
good at something, I figure it out. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, this is brand new, but let's figure out how to do it. And I'll do research and I don't give up as easy as maybe some other people because I have that motivation inside of like, okay, you got to, if you want something, and this is what I want my children to know, if they want something, they can have it, but they're going to have to do the work to get it. And we have to be creative to open up our mindset and to have that growth mindset that everything is possible if you're willing to do the work. If you're not willing to do the work, then yeah, it's not possible. But that opportunity of possibility rather than stare at the limitations to go, listen, you can do anything and everything if you want it, but you're going to have to work for it. It's your choice,
That's
you
so
know?
true. And Kara, when I first met you, I knew you were the model for me of effort eats talent for breakfast. Like literally.
Yes.
Like I did not know how talented you were, but I definitely knew how hard you worked. And I think that's the one thing that I've had to deal with in terms of effort plus discipline will always be talent. Like effort time. Like it's there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I mean, and so it's great that you're asking them, like, do you love it? What do you love about it? Like, oh, and how much did you work on it? Did it come natural? Because sometimes things come so natural that you actually, and this is back to the strengths of what I love coaching people with, like they don't know that they naturally bring something that other people cannot, that we will take a lot of effort on their part. So that's why I like to tell people focus on what comes natural to you, but work hard on the things that may not if it's going to be of use for you. And that's why people say, oh, I don't have a high talent of communication. I want to be a better public speaker. Well, recently, in the last couple of months, I've been actually coaching people in speaking, in particular TED Talks. And I've been realizing,
So
yeah, I'm excited.
I need to connect with you.
Oh, definitely.
Yes,
And
good.
I actually have someone that you should totally interview for this podcast because
I love
she's
it.
a representation of, big freaking change. She's an immigrant who came at 23 years old from Colombia and she didn't speak English. And yet here she is on a TEDx stage,
I love
right?
that.
And what I told her is I can give you public speaking tips and tricks and such. As a public speaker, you and I met at a public speaking, academy, right? And what also needed to happen was a mindset shift, right? About her language, right? Or about what's my message? Who's this for? Are people thinking about, am I going to be thinking about me when I'm on stage or am I going to be thinking about my audience? So all that to say, I think the effort that this individual just put in to like literally looking at and it was ironic because the topic she was talking about, self-compassion, was actually what was showing up every time we talked. Like, was she being self-compassionate about where she was in her development of her speech, about where she was? So it was really great to see, and you know that the big freaking change for you is probably one of the biggest areas that you've grown in, right?
But yeah, like
Because
writing a book was
yeah,
shifting my career to go, okay, I'm a dancer. I love this. And it's interesting when we talk about identity. When I went into heroic public speaking, I was like, I'm not going to dance in my keynote. Like, I'm a dancer, but like now I'm a
yeah,
speaker. Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to, no, like
It's
that
so
doesn't go
different.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm putting up my blazer, not my tights, like
Yes.
here we
Yeah.
go. And then everyone was like, no, but it's so fascinating. And this is who you are. And I remember my coach, AJ Harper, she was like, Cara, you are one person and you can't like not have that history. Like this is what makes you you. So bring it on stage and create this because you're going to stand out by being, the dancer, the girl that talks about getting out of the wings, the girl who talks about this, whatever. Hearing that from her, I was like, yeah, because it's just a strength of mine that I'm like, oh, like I'm 43 now. So like a high kick, like, I don't know. It's just like, do it, and you
Yeah.
do a high kick and people are like, wow.
Wow. Exactly.
So it's really fascinating what we hold ourselves back and when we give ourselves permission and to see our strengths and to writing the book for me was okay. I'm not a great writer, so I need to learn and I need to redo and I need to, AJ used to say to me, okay, Cara, it's good, but it's not good enough. You're going to have to like do it again. And I would be like, AJ, I can't, there's nothing else in me. Like, I can't make this better. And she'd be like, take a break, try again. Here's what I want you to focus on. And then we got into a really great rhythm where she'd be like, okay, before you start writing, I want you to write down like 5 key points of what you want your person to take away from this chapter. Just 5 key points. That's it. And so I'd write it. And then she'd be like, because I would go off on tangents like all over the place. She's like, you got to own that in. You have like 10 books. You have material for 10 books. Like we're talking
That's
one.
right.
And then I started learning new techniques and then I started getting into a flow. But I had so much resistance. And I had probably every month, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like I'm trying my hardest and I'm not getting the results. And then now when I look at my book, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wrote a book. And
Yeah.
when I read my book as a reader, I bawled my face off being like, I can't believe this came out of me. And it was years of work and so many revisions and lots of feedback and advanced readers and coaching. And what I learned through that process is really anything is possible. Like I was a girl who had a learning disability when I was young. And now in reading and writing, I was like 4 years behind my classmates. And now I wrote a book. And writing the book, I think as soon as I get the official book in my hands in like 3 weeks, like the final
Nice.
product,
Good. Good.
I'm
Good.
going to cry, but it's going to be a moment of you have to let this limiting belief die. Like it's done. Yes, you grew up that way and you had to work hard, but own your brilliance. And my brilliance is going to be different. Like calculus kicked my butt, right? But we don't need to compare that. Like it's like I'm very creative. I can read people, I can connect to people. And so that is something that I just want to own and focus on because it comes naturally. And sometimes when it's natural, we discredit it, we
Mm-hmm.
discount
That's
it.
right. We do.
So yeah, I love your work and I love everything that you stand by.
Thank you.
Eduardo, where can we find more about you, get your book, listen to you, talk to us about the resources?
Yeah, I mean, so LinkedIn, Eduardo Villavicencio. So I used to run a company called Ed Vision IT. So that's my LinkedIn handle for most of the things, Ed Vision It. And now, I'm rebranding with Inherited Conversations. Fortaleza is the name of the book here.
Okay, perfect.
And actually, I'm working with the publisher on a women's version of it. So this is
Great.
there's a lot of great folks in here that I've worked with, and yeah, Ed Vision It is sort of what a brand I used to have. And right now, as I'm, going out there to do, speaking engagements for companies, I'm also, one of the new things I'm doing is I'm working with actually a colleague that I met at our public speaking academy on advanced leadership concepts, and a gentleman by the name of Sean Flattery, and he's just amazing. And we just are looking to facilitate, and we're really looking to change the way that capitalism shows up, for people, and not have it just be an exchange or transactional tactical exchange of money for services. And I think that's project I'm really excited about, outside of my work and the strengths work and such.
Eduardo, talk to me as we wrap up this call how you define courage and anything else you would love to share with the listeners about making
Yeah,
a big freaking change, tapping into your courage. I always say you don't need more confidence, but you need to embrace your courage. You need to flex your courage muscle
totally.
confidence will come. But let's hear your take on courage.
Well, my take on courage, actually, I have a quote, and every author has a quote on the back of the book. And one of the things I'll share is I had studied French in high school. So I grew up knowing that courage came from the heart. I grew up most of my life from the neck up, very analytical, very brainy, very like data. That's what's going to make the difference. And I remember I took a leadership course where in part of the course is learning how to listen to people. And I accomplished a milestone in the course. And there's a gentleman who I just never met. He was in the room, and at the end he said, "Hey, how did you do it? What's the secret? I'm going to take the course too. What would you?" And I just somehow out of my mouth came, "You know what? I think I realized that the way I was going to make a difference was through my heart, not my smarts." And he's like, "That's brilliant." And I said, "I don't know why I just said that, but there was something around connecting." And I think courage really makes me think about what you talk about, which is like, let me take the action, right, to follow my heart. And you were talking about the kids earlier. I think the most powerful 3-letter word in the English language is yet, I-E-T. Anytime my middle school students or now the adults that I say something like, "Oh, I don't know," or "I can't do that," or something, I'm like, and I'll train them to go, "Oh yeah, yet. I don't know yet," or "I haven't done it yet," or "I haven't written the book yet." Mm-hmm. And so, can I read a little quote?
Yes, please. Yes, take it home.
So somewhere in my life, I realized this: the best relationships or results in my life were found on the other side of a conversation that I was hesitant to start. Now I use fear as a compass for my heart. And so what I mean by that is anytime I notice that I'm hesitating or I'm afraid, and afraid is a big word, right? We might just say, "Oh, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm bored, I'm procrastinating." But anytime I notice, what is the actual fear? I literally have found a way to, okay, on the other side of this, I'll look back and realize, what was I afraid of? Or why did I take so long? Or why did I? And so I think that is courage for me now, to be able to admit, one, to notice and be willing to notice, and two, to potentially tell others, "Hey, I just noticed I have this habit," or "I'm scared of this," or, and the moment I say that out loud, it's a book I read, someone says something, you have to name it to tame it. And the moment that you name something, it loses its power or its hold on you. That's what I hope to help people with. Everyone has some wall that is not real for anyone else but them. But the moment that they can notice that wall, did I make that up? Is it really real? Who can help me to get or see that there is another side on the other side of it that would, help me move forward, lean in, or take action to be ready.
Yes, I love it. Muchas gracias para todo. Tú es muy inteligente, muy simpático.
Merci beaucoup.
De nada, you speak the French, I'll speak the Spanish.
Oui, bien sûr.
So I loved our conversation, Inherited Conversations. Your keynote is brilliant. The work you do is so impactful. It shifts people's mindsets. It helps people get into action. I'm going to read your book, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing your time, sharing your brilliance, sharing your inspiration. And really, it comes down to, what is it in ourselves that we need to break open to release so we can step into the next version of ourselves. So gracias to all the listeners. Remember to reflect on the limiting conversations you have with yourself, inherited conversations that you've just taken on, and what you really want in life and your natural strengths, because that's how we can make some great momentum together. Bye for now, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and would be so grateful if you could share it with someone else that could benefit from it. Let's remember to change our relationship to change itself and take aligned action. If we want to make meaningful changes in our lives, we need to embrace stepping into the next version of ourselves in the process. Remember, stop waiting to feel ready and start taking action today.